And do you also take in this neurotransmitter story? Because I always try to educate myself more about different topics. And now I just had a training into neurotransmitters. Like you said, when I am not well attached to my mom came from an alcoholic family. So I call it the necklace of attachment. But you can see it in behavior and challenges. But it's also, I don't know the translation, biochemical.
Yeah.
Like I have a different system. I have lower neurotransmitters. You know the Braverman test, right? The test where you can... I had the lowest one of my whole class. It was almost funny. But that's how I live my life already. So for so many years, I have to struggle extra because my levels are so low.
Yeah.
And I think that's also good. What I try to share my followers is that you have behavior, you have trauma-informed tools, but also look at your neurotransmitters, your hormones, and the hormone systems, but also food, for example. Because I see it as a puzzle. There's more than just the trauma-informed approach.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and a big part of what we talk about is that if you understand the physiology of regulation, which involves sort of the regulatory capabilities of your neurotransmitter networks, it involves nutrition is a huge part of it, physical exercise, sleep, all of these sort of regulatory elements that if you have external structure and external predictability, you have a much better chance of having internal predictability, internal regulation.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time, the very simple steps can sometimes lead to huge differences. So we'll literally say, all right, we're going to prescribe 5 minutes of walking every hour.
Oh, yeah.
And think of it literally as a pill. That when your Apple Watch buzzes and you need to get up and walk for 5 minutes and come back to your desk or come back to whatever you're doing. And that simple things like that really begin to make the parent more regulated. And then we add on regulatory activities for the child. And so the more regulated everybody in the household is, pretty soon the household becomes regulated, and it feels better. And when it feels better, people are able to be more relationally connected and feel pleasure from that.
Yeah.
And the more pleasure you can have from that, then there's this sort of, like I said, this virtuous cycle. And but many, many, many of these families are in the other kind of cycle, where you come home from work and you're exhausted and frustrated, and the child comes home from school and they've done poorly, and then they interact, and it's like they escalate each other.
Yeah.
And it's
hard.
It is hard. It's very hard.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then that's what you also say about relational poverty, Western society, and how we deal with all that, and the stress, and mom and dad working long hours, and that's hard, isn't it?
It is hard. I mean, we've created these environments that really put too many demands on the parent and the child.
Yeah.
And if you are lucky enough to be kind of genetically or epigenetically pretty well regulated, you can tolerate that stuff. It's not like it's good for you, but you can tolerate it.
Yeah.
But if you are over on the other spectrum where you have any vulnerability, you're much more likely to have struggles. And you can see it. I mean, you can see the rise in suicidality, the rise in anxiety, the rise in depression in the Western world. And, the percentages of individuals who've had adversity, we're just really, we have a resilience-resistant culture. In other words, we've organized our society in a way that we are minimizing opportunities to build resilience.
Yeah.
So if you go back to I don't want to call it primitive, but if you go, let's say you go back to a community where there was no electronics, where there was very little mobility, 8 or 9 people lived in a single home, your grandparents lived on the street, and there was this sort of social fabric that was very densely connected. Those communities are much more likely to tolerate stressors, whether they're economic stressors or they're natural disaster stressors or they're mental health stressors, whatever they are, that community is more resilient than our typical modern society in the US. Now, and again, I've been to the Netherlands and Europe a few times. It strikes me that you guys are better than we are. You know, as I think so. I mean, I think that I do. I think that from what little I know about your culture and society, there's more physical proximity, there's better third spaces, people have more conversation, people still have meals where it will talk for 2 hours. You know, that just does not happen much in the US anymore. It's the number of family meals in the average American house is less than 2 a week.
I think you mentioned that in one of your talks.
Yeah.
Crazy. No.
It is crazy.
Yeah, no.
It is crazy.